Aliens versus Avengers issue 2. I like this series from the fact that it pits the Earth's mightiest Avengers against the perfect organism. Though one thing that I wish that they would have done with this series is given it a starting point where how did Earth get infested with the Xenomorph plague? In this issue, we're kind of given some tidbits on that, but I really would have preferred more. And we'll dive into that here in a second. Let's kind of talk about the plot in and of itself first. So I like how this starts out saying another universe, another time. And essentially, we get a retelling of the beginning of Covenant. I'm not even going to get into that. I have a love-hate relationship with Covenant. I like the concepts of Prometheus, but when those two films came out, I really wish that it would have stuck more to just horror rather than philosophical questions. Because Alien, Predator, you want action, you want gore, you want violence, and you could throw in some philosophical stuff or subtext here and there, but the whole thing of where do we come from, it just and introducing I always forget what they call the black goo, Pythagoras, Propagona, or whatever. You guys know what I'm trying to say. It just really for me cheapened the Alien, because when you first watch that original film and you see the shoehorn, I forget what they call it, the Titan or something like that, for the first time, and when Kane finds the room full of eggs, you're wondering who are these massive giants, etc., so forth. Now, again, going back to talking about comics, after Aliens back in the 80s, Dark Horse got the IP and started making a direct sequel to Aliens, which was the first set of Alien comics that Dark Horse ever created, which was aptly called, I think the whole arc was called Earth War. And in there, we find out about the engineers, though they're not really called engineers, and what they ultimately want and why they were carrying the eggs to LV-426. And it was really nicely done. And then Alien 3 came out, and that whole thing, the whole world that Dark Horse had created from beyond the Earth War, where Earth's trying to come back from being invaded by the Xenomorph, got tossed out the window into extended universe stuff. I know. It's huge antidote. And from what I understand, if I'm wrong, feel free to let me know down in the comments. But when Neil Blomkamp was going to do Alien 4, which was essentially, said he wasn't trying to retcon Alien 3, but I think he was trying to create like an alternate universe type bit where it was supposed to bring back Michael Biehn and Sigourney Weaver after the events of Aliens. I believe that finally got tossed out the window because Ridley Scott said that he wanted to do Prometheus. And I think that is the crux of what really irks my Gurk about both Prometheus and Covenant. I finally ordered Romulus, supposed to release December 3rd on Blu-ray, so I'll try to talk about that over on the After Dark channel. But with that said, this is an alternate universe. Prometheus, or we're kind of, again, experiencing Covenant. The artwork, I love. I mean, I forget how to pronounce his name. Esed Ribic, I think is how you pronounce his name. We'll go with that. We see him coming to the engineer's homeworld. They're all in awe of the shoehorn spaceship returning. We see David, which this kind of kills me. I wish that they would have captured Michael. We're going to call him Michael Fassbender's lightness more. Because here, this just looks like grumpy old man. He has like this real frumpy face. He goes, just look at them. Now remember, in Covenant, it's just David in and of himself, and that's it. But what I like here is where the curveball comes when we turn the page. Again, spoilers, if you haven't seen this or read it, pause it, go get it, come back, and you're back. All right. All of a sudden, there's now 3 Davids. Yes, look at them. They created all life in this universe, and then life created us. And now we are here, brother. And they are far below us. Yes, like ants. I would think meeting one's creator would have some higher value, would feel more significant than meeting one's maker. But I feel no differently about the engineers than I do humanity. Offended, appalled. And then we kind of get a upward shot where he says that something like that is an origin of something like me. And then we get, again, where David released all the pathogen on the engineers. I like that, the less is more thing, where we're not seeing everything that happened like in Prometheus, but we get the concept. And then David just says, ants. So, for those of you that are wondering, this is David's first appearance in the Marvel Universe. Now we come to find out what him and his brothers are doing with the pathogens. This is 100 years later, 10,000 planets later. And we come to find out they're seeding different worlds with the pathogen, essentially creating his own utopia. Now, I love how they use like the mother texture. Even the little browser window here says mother. So the writer is Jonathan Hickman. Artist is Esed Ribic. Colorist is it's either Ivy, I'm going to go with that, Sivorsina. Letter is VC's Corey Petit. Cover, again, Esed Ribic. So I love that the interior artist is also the cover artist. There's everyone else working on the book. So if y'all want to know, check it out. I'll also leave this so you guys can kind of read it at your convenience. Now, again, this kind of picks up from the last issue. Again, spoilers. Valeria, Reed Richards' daughter, found a way she was going to try to infect the Xenomorphs. But she ends up getting infected herself, and it goes to infect Miles Morales. And we'll talk about that again here in a second. We now go to this universe, 20 years ago, Earth. This is the first meeting between Weyland-Yutani and Stark Industries. And we see that basically David is kind of the leader of Weyland-Yutani at this point. Or at least that's what I'm assuming. It's either that, because that doesn't look like... what is the guy's... Is it Hiro Yutani? I can't remember his name. But the merger's happening, and Stark finds a way to usurp them. Because the corporate guy here says, it doesn't happen often, but you've surprised me. You see, I give this deal an unusually high likelihood of ending in a hostile takeover or some other combative corporate mechanism that would result in an eventual forced capitulation. So I have to know, Mr. Stark, was I once again expecting too much, or was I simply wrong? Now, here's a thing that really is what kind of irks my Gurk about this book. We see that in the future, Stark, old broken man, or so he appears in this issue. I wish that we could have seen early on, like when they're still in their prime, because to finally get a comic book that is Avengers versus aliens, we get this kick-ass variant of Thor ripping through them with his, the God of Thunder here. To open it up, and we get grumpy old men. And that's, while I'm reading this and trying to enjoy it, that's all I could think of is the Walter Matthau, and I can't remember the other cat's name, but you guys remember Grumpy Old Men 1 and 2. And they got that whole... I mean, at this point, Stark's even in a flapping wheelchair, and he goes, have you ever heard the expression playing possum? Excuse me? Playing possum. You ever heard that? No, I haven't. So Stark says, do you even have possums in your universe? And again, how he says universe. So somehow the alien universe and the 616 have merged. How? I mean, we at least found out in the more recent Secret Wars how that incursion, or whatever it was called, when all the worlds came together and Victor Von Doom, to save one universe, he made an Amalgam War world. I would have loved to have seen that. This would have been so cool if they would have taken their time and built that up. That would have been awesome. But Stark says, and again, some reading, at first I thought you were just a run-of-the-mill corporate sociopath. All that relentless aggression and single-mindedness is something I'm familiar with. But it was uncanny that the way that the Weyland Corporation never repeated mistakes, your company's unemotional practicality and total lack of institutional memory. It felt like an inhuman organism, almost alien. So I got curious. I took some time to get inside your systems, but I needed a closer look to fully understand what I was dealing with. What a horrifying box you're about to open. And so I'm assuming this is David, and we see him lose his mind. And we only get, at this point, only one little glimpse of Iron Man. He goes, "Thank you. That's the information I needed. Ah, playing possum. I'll have to remember that." So neat stuff like that. But then we get angry old Tony, angry old Carol, middle-aged Miles, and grumpy old Bruce Banner. And that's what I mean by I would have loved to have seen these heroes in their prime. Because, I mean, I get the artist's interpretation with the shadows and the deep lines to show that they are worn down at this part. Essentially, Stark is wanting to jump ship because Earth is overtaken. They've lost Valeria, and he doesn't want to lose no more people. But I don't like how they start to really color Tony here towards the end of this issue. Now, Miles, see how the Venom symbiote here on his outfit looks very different? Last issue, he was caught by the Facehugger that Valeria was working on. But before it could do its thing, the symbiote saved him. So now he has the symbiote Facehugger on his chest. And I wish that we could have seen some more relationship between these two, but Miles is like, "I know I said it first, but that's really it. We're going to cut and run, give up on the human race." And then Carol, "We haven't heard from any of the other outposts or watchtowers in weeks. Nothing from Clint, Steve, Nat, any of them. We are what's left of the human race, and no one is coming to save us." And so essentially this whole, I guess you could say the last bits of humanity, this, what's the word I'm looking for? Sanctuary is kind of an escape pod. And again, look at this. Old man Bruce. I just wish I would have seen the Avengers in their prime trying to take down these monsters. That just would have been so nice. And now the use of the war machines here is a cool concept. And as we get towards the bottom, we realize that there's someone coming to seek sanctuary with survivors. And again, don't get me wrong, seeing old man Captain America is pretty cool. And not like the old man Steve Rogers we saw when he lost the superhero serum and basically Deadpool had to carry him around like a geriatric. That was obnoxious. But seeing someone that years and years just barely starting to enter the elderly part of his life, it's pretty kick-ass, don't get me wrong. Especially, and this is where we see Tony start to turn from someone who's smart, resourceful, and essentially kind of makes him not so much an anti-hero, but more like I don't want to say a villain, but it's enough to kind of make you go, ugh. But then again, Tony has always been the one that makes the hard decisions, even since Civil War, etc., so forth. My favorite panel, though, and I wish this would have been a little bit more dynamic. Don't get me wrong, it's dynamic, but something more low angle, up close, like the old school Marvel way, like a Buscema or Romita or even a Jim Lee. But still, seeing Cap use his shield to take out the Xenomorphs. And that also makes me wonder, I can't remember from the first issue if they said that vibranium was acid-proof or not. So, nonetheless, still really cool. And again, we finally get to see the Hulk in this issue. And he has to make a choice. Tony's not happy with it because he needs him. But Bruce, even though he is just on about the same level as Tony Stark, he knows that the human race is worth saving. So I love that Bruce is sort of this mixture of both Cap and Tony, where he has Tony's smarts, but he has Cap's heart. And that's what kind of basically leads to this schism between him and Tony Stark. And I wish we could have gotten more panels of seeing the Hulk rip through this infestation. So what kind of irked me the most about this? As I said, just grumpy old men. I would have loved to have seen this been built up, had like some sort of Marvel event. Like, again, sort of like I always like to use Age of Apocalypse as a frame of reference. Cancel all the ongoing series, so that way there's no confusion and continuity. make one, like, lead up in like Avengers, X-Men, because at this point apparently the X-Men are only on the moon. They've totally just bailed on Earth, which the X-Men at this point, they're not my X-Men, whatever. Anyway, so the mutants are not part of it. They could have led off somewhere in Krakoa, have an Avengers book, and then maybe have a tie-in with an Iron Man issue where we see this incursion happen and Weyland-Yutani all of a sudden comes on the scene, and maybe have David presenting himself as Peter Weyland and starts to charm the people more than Stark. And then we could have launched this book and started showing all of what David wants to do and how long it's taken Tony to fight against the Weyland Corporation. That just would have been nice instead of just getting straight up old men Avengers. That's my primary gripe. And again, there's a lot of exposition happening. So I wish that we could have seen more action. Because the first half, like, I love this opening up where they're kind of in their own universe way doing Covenant. That was cool. But I wish that there would have been more action. As you can see, there's a lot of standing and arguing. Standing and arguing. And then we get a few pages of Cap ripping through these Xenomorphs, trying to bring the last vestiges of humanity to this outpost. Even Tony's getting ready to destroy everything. So even though we get this great action, we get no cool little quips from Captain America. It's still Bruce and Tony voiceover fighting. So a lot of talking. So I'm hoping now that the stage has essentially been set, I'm hoping that we start getting to see some more action. Because that's what this book needs, is an infusion of action. Just kind of how issue 1 started out with Black Panther's son ripping through the Xenomorphs on that alien spaceship. I would love to see more action and maybe some chest bursting as well. So what do y'all think? Are you enjoying Aliens versus Avengers? If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please first and foremost support your local comic shop or wherever there's going to get your action figures and comics and grab this series. If you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little Xenomorph bell next subscribe, that way as I continue to upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with y'all and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.